Welcome to the Josh Button Podcast, where we discuss health, wellness, and outliers from society. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Josh Button Podcast, episode 73. Today, I'm joined by Jason Stauffer. Brother, thank you for being here. We go back a little ways, and how we met was really interesting because you were pretty much, I think you were in the market for a little while, but you had the absolute greatest invention that I've ever found, the best ice bath on the market, Morosco.
Yeah.
But you've gotten into all kinds of things since then. I want to know about your history because I know you started with service and in the service, and it's probably come full circle in your life in all kinds of ways because now you're coaching individuals and corporations on how to really pursue purpose and achieve success. So please introduce yourself. You're going to do a much better job than I can. Tell us where you're at and what you're working on.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the invitation, Josh. It's great to see you. And yeah, we do go back quite a ways. Well, it's like 6 years, but it's been an interesting 6 years all around in the world. Yeah, starting with the service. Yeah, joined the Army in 1999. I was doing that until 2005. I was in the initial invasion of Iraq in 2003. Exited from the military late 2005, ended up getting my engineering degree in civil, environmental, and sustainable engineering from Arizona State University on the GI Bill. Went into pharmaceutical business analytics, which got me kind of this behind the scenes view of the Western United States allopathic healthcare system, which for that reason and a few others got me really interested in true human health and wellness rather than just symptom management, which led me into the Morosco venture where I co-founded Morozko Forge, invented the world's first consumer ice bath machine in 2018 prior to the big boom of cold plunging and all of the products that are now available. I've long since lost track of how many inflatable tubs are out there. And yeah, I've been the last year or so been stepping into coaching and consulting, both on an executive coaching level and operational consulting, just kind of using everything that I embody and understand, know, and I have experience through all of those journeys in how to help projects solidify more coherent communication, uh, identify and define problems, obstacles, co-creatively collaborate on solutions, and test for effective versus ineffective results. Rinse, repeat, move forward, grow, scale, become a stronger company and a stronger culture.
And it is amazing how many biohackers and health and wellness influencers / experts that I found that started actually in pharmaceuticals or in medicine in one way or another, really studying allopathic remedies from the inside, which
Yeah.
led them to all of these discoveries. So what was the first trigger for you?
First trigger in the arc of moving from pharmaceutical business analytics into, kind of holistic or non-traditional health and wellness. Yeah. So in my early few years in the, for-profit pharmaceutical industry, I learned very innately that that system has evolved and grown, I feel quite organically, into being almost entirely about symptom management. And there's no shortage of memes on the internet, I know that you're aware of, that kind of vilify the pharmaceutical industry, the big bad pharmaceutical industry, and the big bad, this and that. And maybe there's some truth to that. But whenever I tell this story, I stop to say that my overwhelming experience in the allopathic healthcare system is it's overwhelmingly full of good people who want to do good things. This is just what they know how to do. They know how to help people feel better about their disease states. And so just getting into and understanding that, it got me out of working in a very small for-profit pharmaceutical company. And I got into consulting with nonprofit hospitals, helping them leverage a specific federal program called the 3B program. Now, this is a very obscure piece of legislation that basically says that if you're a pharmaceutical manufacturer and you want federal reimbursement for your products. You want the federal government to pay for your products on Medicare and Medicaid, which you do want. That's a huge book of business. That approval comes with some strings attached. And one of those strings attached is that you must offer your products at drastic discounts to certain qualifying nonprofit hospital systems. And this can take a $5,000 drug and turn it into a one penny drug for these, again, nonprofit healthcare systems. And so you get out of the for-profit pharma side and you start working as a consultant, helping these nonprofit hospitals, leverage a federal program so that they can massively reduce their drug spend. And you feel like Robin Hood, right? You feel like okay, I'm on the other side of this, which can be true from a certain perspective. And so I was going around the country. By processing all of this pharmaceutical data. Part of what I was doing was auditing patient records. I'm learning from a macro level perspective, like really about the pharmaceutical usage in the United States. I could see from a data perspective where the pockets of quote unquote chronic and metabolic illnesses were. I can see where there was high rates of hypertension and obesity and diabetes and things like that. I'm looking into the patient records and I'm seeing this rubber stamp in a patient visit record. I met with Sylvia today. She's a very pleasant 68-year-old woman, presents with hypertension and pre-diabetes. Rubber stamp, continue all meds. Rubber stamp, continue all meds. Rubber stamp, continue all meds. I'm touring these hospital systems, which again, overwhelmingly full of good people who want to do good things. And this is just the way that the system is. The system is organically has evolved to really just help people feel better rather than addressing root cause issues of disease states. And again, these are nonprofit hospital systems who go through various qualifying pathways, one of which is they're in rural areas. And in a rural area, there just isn't a population large enough for for-profit healthcare services to go. So enter in these nonprofit, a lot of them are religiously affiliated systems. Another one is our hospital systems that have a disproportionate share of individuals who are on low income, who have no insurance or sparse insurance. Basically, that's a way to say that they're in socioeconomically depressed areas. And I'm looking at all of these cultures of people and the foods that they're eating and seeing the prevalence of metabolic and chronic illness. And just getting a sense of, even though I feel like I've jumped to the Robin Hood side of things, I'm still within this greater system of just this rubber stamp, continue all meds, continue all meds, continue all meds. No physician that I saw is putting in the patient records. I spoke with this individual about their diet, their exercise, their sun exposure, their this, their that. When I tell this story, I also stop at this point to say this is, again, kind of pushing back a little bit on the vilification that we can slip into of the system itself and say that while there is a supply side issue to this problem, specifically, how much that pharmaceutical products are marketed direct to consumers. Last I checked, there are only 2 countries in the entire world that this is even legal, the United States and New Zealand, where pharmaceutical companies can put up ads. And I don't watch commercial television anymore, but anytime I see a screen in a restaurant, like 80% of the commercial breaks are all pharmaceutical products. So that's a supply side problem. But there's also a demand side to this problem. There's a personal choice side to this problem, where even if I am a physician who wants to have these conversations with a patient who is presenting with these disease states about their diet, about their exercise, about, their sun exposure, whatever it is that can help them not just lean on symptom management, but reverse and mitigate the disease states themselves. So many of those patients are going to walk out of that doctor's office. They're going to go down the hall into another doctor's office, and they're going to say, I just want to feel better. I don't want to be lectured about my lifestyle choices. I don't want to do the work, So it's this big kind of mess, right? And so I just started thinking about how can I how can I affect change in my own personal life with my own personal health and wellness, and how can I support that, even if it's on such a minor level of our society, of our culture, in a way that helps individuals take more control over their health, their wellness, to stay out of the doctor's office, to stay out of the pharmacy, to stay out of the hospital, to whatever extent is humanly possible. And this gets me into a lot of personal study, a lot of, just reading books on books on books on books about health, wellness, fitness, psychology, mindset, and even reading old fiction, old novels from like John Steinbeck and Hemingway and all these other things that gave an insight into how cultures were living not that long ago. And I started to solidify this understanding of where these chronic illnesses, these disease states that are showing up and for all intents and purposes regarded as incurable in our culture are coming from. And I'm understanding that while, we talk about like fasting, intermittent fasting, extended fasting, things like that. And if you tell your family that you're fasting, they're going to look at you like you're killing yourself, like you're starving yourself. But read some old books. Like not that long ago, fasting was very common. A lot of religious traditions have it baked into their teachings. And if you stretch back even further in human history, they didn't call it fasting. They called it, we didn't find food today. And so we are abundant with food. We are abundant with processed, industrialized food. We are abundant in food additives. Things that were toxic industrial waste 100 years ago are now approved food additives. We are increasingly lethargic. Our nervous systems are all out of whack from everything that has been invented and evolved over the last 100 years. And so I just started looking for ways to artificially get back to some sort of addressing my system, my diet, the things that I was eating. And then this gets into the temperatures that I was exposing myself to. And so I just started like sleeping on the ground in my backyard in Phoenix, Arizona in the summers, and climbing trees barefoot and keeping the air conditioner off as long as humanly possible, and not even turning the heater on in the winter, understanding it's Phoenix, Arizona. Even if it gets down to 55 degrees, that might be uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. And this gets into taking ice baths. And I might stop rambling now and open up for feedback and reactions.
Not the ice bath thing. I think we all found that after layers of that other consciousness that started to set in, when it was like, okay, we can embrace discomfort, and that's probably good for us. So obviously, you took an ice bath once or twice before you invented the Morosco, right? And where were you at in your holistic journey, like for yourself at that time?
Yeah, I was again I was doing a lot with my diet, reducing processed foods, carbs. I was doing some extended fasting. First one was like 24 hours, which was just like an eye opener, like, oh my gosh, I can go 24 hours without eating and I don't die. And then, 48 hours. I think the longest one I ever did was about 3 days. And reducing and eliminating the carbs, getting into ketogenic dieting, and got the keto strips so I can know when I am in at or out of ketosis. Looking at how I was feeling, how I was looking in the mirror, and also in the environmental exposure. Again, keeping the air conditioner off and spending time outside, feeling the range of temperature volatility. And this is about the same time that Wim Hof was really kind of getting big in the United States. So this is like 2017. Like I said, I'm climbing trees barefoot. I'm sleeping on the ground outside in the summertime. And I'm looking on Instagram and I see some friends and they're taking ice baths. I'm like, okay, this is the next thing. This is that next thing. And so it was October of 2017 that I did my first Wim Hof breath work, followed by an ice bath at a friend of mine's house in Phoenix, Arizona. And yeah, the two things happened on the same day. The first kind of really deep holotropic breathwork exercise in the first ice bath. And one of the things that I loved about that experience is doing the breath work, again, that was something that showed me that I am stronger than I think I am, because I'm doing the deep breathing, I'm getting oxygenated, I'm holding my breath. I'm like, holy crap, I can hold my breath for 2 minutes. Now I'm feeling better about this ice bath that's coming up next that is in the backyard that I'm having anxiety over. And I took that first ice bath. And I don't know how long it lasted. It was maybe 30, 45 seconds. And it was definitely an intense experience. And when I stepped out of it, it was like all of my systems had just been rebooted. Like they all just like came back online. Like the colors were brighter. I was more present. It was that kind of that after effect of the shock of the ice bath. And I was like, there's something to this. I don't know what it is, but there's something innately, viscerally that I'm feeling that there is to this. And so I got my own horse trough, my own galvanized steel tub. I pulled it to my backyard and just started hosting, weekly Sunday breathwork and ice bath, and just continuing to feel better and feel the power of that experience. And then there came this question of, how do we do this more often and easier? Because getting 200 pounds of ice once a week, so you've got a couple of hours to get you and 4 or 5 other people through an ice bath, that's okay. How do I get out of bed, not even have to brush my teeth, not even have to get dressed, go out to my backyard and just get my ice bath done, kick my day off? And first thing that we did is we looked online. We're like, well, maybe there's some sort of mechanical solution here, right? And there were a couple of companies out there. One had this like $24,000 big hot tub looking machine. And then the other things that we found were just these very expensive, very heavy chiller boxes. And they were all marketed for like sports teams, for fitness centers. It was all a B2B kind of application. There was nothing for the home user. And so I said, well, what if we just make something? I got an engineering degree. My co-founding partner, who I know Tom Seeger, and he's got some knowledge of thermodynamics. And we're just like, what if we made a machine? And so I started just tearing apart refrigerators in my backyard, just trying to figure out, okay, how does this thing work? From my engineering education, I know that cold does not actually exist. Cold is the absence of thermal energy. Cold is what something is in its natural state when you remove the thermal kinetic energy from it. That's how any refrigerator works, is it's removing the thermal energy from an enclosed insulated space and it's dissipating it out to the environment. All right. So I'm tearing apart dorm fridges. I take my horse trough, I put it on a bed of sand. I build a pine box around it. I grab like $300 worth of spray foam insulation from Home Depot. I fill in the gaps. I tear the door off of this freezer that I destroyed in the process. I took the guts out of 2 dorm fridges. I draped it over the side in the water. I put the door to the freezer on top. I plugged them in. I came back 3 days later. I had an all the time ice bath. So like, hey, proof of concept. And through this journey, at some point, it was, what if we start a company? What if we figure out how to build our own refrigeration system so we're not tearing apart dorm fridges? How do we put this in a box that we can ship? How do we find the other maniacs and lunatics who are waking up to this cold exposure thing? How do we sell to them? How do we grow an Instagram account? How do we do this? How do we do that? That just kind of went forward from there. And it was an interesting time and place to be, because this is like 2018 when we founded the company and just started working on taking that backyard engineering project and turning it into a product. And we had our first sale in January and sold about, I don't know, 3 dozen units or so through 2019. Everybody had a day job. Say again?
Is that the year that we got ours out there?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It was 18, right?
Yeah. It was 2019. Yeah, I know that for a fact because it gets into, everybody had a day job. We're doing this nights and weekends. We're building a little workshop in my backyard in Phoenix, and then we get into 2020, and we all know what happened in 2020. The whole world goes crazy over the pandemic. You know, March 2020 happens, and the world is going upside down crazy. In 2019 and early 2020, we were selling maybe 2 or 3 of these backyard units a month. And then when everything was going crazy, everything dried up for like 2 weeks. Like nobody was even like sending emails to the info inbox to talk about ice baths. Nobody knew what was going to happen in the world. We're like, well, we don't really know what's going to happen in the world. And a couple of things happened at the same time. One is we started getting some promotion from Ben Greenfield. We were able to get a unit out to him in late 2019. It actually froze solid at his house in Spokane, Washington. So we had to wait for the spring for it to thaw out, which was a great lesson in communicating how to operate the device to customers so they're not just leaving the refrigeration running while it's negative 10 degrees outside. And so that thawed out, and Ben started posting about it. Some people were starting to get their head back into the world, even though their gyms were closed down, their healthcare centers were closed down, their wellness centers were closed down, everything was still closed down. But the people who had the physical space and the means to start investing in their home health and wellness equipment started doing so. And so all of a sudden, we went from selling 2 to 3 a month to 2 to 3 a week to 2 to 3 a day. And it just, I always count the blessing that for whatever else was going on in the country and the world during 2020, that event kind of blew us up. And we ended up, with this big backlog of orders. And we were blessed to scale up the workshop in the backyard. We were hiring people, friends who had lost their bartending job, who had lost their office job, some of them with little to no experience in building things. And I always say, we're like, well, all right, you can't bartend right now. Come to the backyard. Help us out with this project that we're working on. This is a hammer. This is a nail. This is a screwdriver. This is a screw. This one goes to this one. This one goes to this one. I'll come back around and see how you did. And from there, we were able to get out of the backyard and into a 5,000 square foot manufacturing facility in West Phoenix by the end of 2020 that we eventually scaled up into 10,000 square feet and just, continued to rise to this, very meteoric rise of an occasion of people continuing to get into this practice of deliberate cold exposure.
Yeah, and the tubs that you guys are doing now, I mean, are completely unlike anything I've seen. They're fascinating. I mean, you've got NFL linemen getting into stand-up tubs now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Come a long way.
Yeah. It's an interesting journey.
When I found you guys, I literally found you because I was tasked with finding the best thing in the market. And
We were the only thing in the market.
what's funny is the person that I was working for at the time, I had pitched him on doing the freezer because I had a freezer at the last place I was at. And I was like, look, let me just build a freezer. And he's like, bro, I'm not getting in a freezer. All
Yeah.
right. I'm unplugged, plugged. I'm just not doing it. So that research led me to you guys. And then my mind was blown as soon as I found you. And one thing led to another. That's how we met. And it was a good thing we did. So, did you actually fall into the biohacking community because of this invention, or were you kind of aligned already, and were the other modalities in your field of view, or did you find those after the fact?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I would say definitely we fell into the biohacking community, quote unquote, which is one of our biggest demographics. I didn't know who Ben Greenfield was until he was introduced to me. Uh, and so that was very interesting from a couple of different perspectives. One, there's so much to learn, right? And so much more down this rabbit hole that we were kind of going down to get into. And it's also very interesting when you don't know I don't know who Ben Greenfield is. Who's this guy, Dave Asprey? Like, I don't know. I mean, he did a podcast with Joe Rogan that I didn't watch, And so to come at it from that perspective and to kind of be, at least in the beginning, a little bit of the outsiders coming in, that was definitely very interesting.
So tell me, you have experience with plant medicine, right?
I do, yeah.
So, do you have any parallels between that and that initial holotropic breathwork session?
It's a great question, and definitely yes. It's very interesting the deep states of consciousness that one can achieve just by breathing, and really getting that oxygen pumping through the body. It is very much like a psychedelic experience at times, especially DMT, because if you're really kind of, bringing that breath in and getting a little, little loopy, yeah, it's very much like a brief DMT experience. And, obviously the breath work, it's not all night long, which is great. You can drop into it. It's accessible. It's just breathing the air around you, and then you can be done with it. And, there's no kind of like after effects. That's not to say that there isn't other benefits to some of those deeper plant medicine ceremonies and experiences. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of crossover there. And something that it's coming up for me now is, they did some brain scans on like Tibetan monks meditating, right? And the scans showed that the Tibetan monks meditating are able to achieve these brain scan readouts that are like the same as somebody in a psilocybin mushroom experience. So, one way to get to that state is eat the mushroom. Another way is spend 10 years meditating. But the interesting part is that that state is accessible without the plant helpers, which I find extremely fascinating.
The subject, have you ever heard of, or have they done research on them when they're sleeping?
The monks?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't read anything about that.
That's where I found lucid dreaming. Dream yoga was the Tibetan monks would they believed that you could live two lives in your sleep as long as you could control the dream state. So
Interesting. Yeah.
I wonder if they've actually done that research, whether or not they've studied or scanned their brains while they were sleeping to see what
Yeah.
kind of activity they had going then.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, how does a monk, what is a monk's brain when they're sleeping? Especially I'm thinking about just the lives that we lead, whether, it's, Zoom calls or whatever, however much time we're spending on our phone, those things definitely I know they affect my brain. There have been times where I was just way too into the social media rabbit holes, and I'm like, okay, I'm dreaming in Instagram reels, and that can't be good for me. Um, so, um, thinking about what does, a Buddhist monk who, is so relatively clean from those screens and those technologies and has been, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years down that pathway of deep meditation, what are they dreaming about? Which is going to be something similar to, again, prior to industrial and technological revolutions of, what was a farmer in the 1700s dreaming about, without all of this other influence.
There are some fascinating books on the actual subject about flying. About
Flying?
flying. Yeah, you heard about the flying monks in different martial arts movies back in the
Sure.
day.
Yeah, yeah.
They were based upon dream yoga monks who believed that they could fly and do things in their dreams because of the control factor that they couldn't possibly do in their wake state. So they actually believed life was more in depth in the dream state than when they were awake.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I imagine if you kept the journal, the dream log long enough, and then you could actually find the signs to let yourself know that you're dreaming and then start taking control of it. And we didn't have all of these technological slash social distractions, and we'd do something absolutely
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, that's interesting.
All right. So you pick up and you go to Austin, Texas.
Yeah, I was splitting time between Phoenix and Austin in 2021 and 2022. Austin was a good early market for the ice bath company. It was also, just kind of out here networking a lot. It's how eventually we got an ice bath to Joe Rogan, which was a huge marketing boost for us. Uh, went back to Phoenix for a while, and then came back out here last November. And I've been here ever since, just because I love the city, I love the community. It's abundant in opportunity of, people working on a lot of interesting companies, startups, a lot of technology and health and wellness and fitness and supplements and medicines and ceremony and all of that. So densely packed into this city, and so it's been a great experience.
Yeah, actually, we briefly talked about a wellness venture for Austin, Texas, and put a little bit of research in, and there's a ton of them now.
There are. I don't even know that I have a thumb on how many of them there are. That event that I was at on Sunday was at one called Sapien Center, and it's a nice little co-working. They've got some cold plunges, a sauna, some gym equipment, nice little space. You know, lizard yoga, Kuya is a big wellness concept here. There's a new one that just came out called Awaken Ranch, AWKN, which is a little bit more of a ranch property that has all of these amenities and is doing breath work and all kinds of interesting things.
Have you heard about the surf?
The surf pool?
Yeah, there's a wave pool that's getting built, and actually, I think it's built now, and they're still in late stages. But they're also partnering with somebody to do a tractor trailer recovery company. So
Okay, yeah, yeah.
they're building out these trailers that'll be your hot, cold,
Nice.
then your cryo, as opposed to the cold plunge, the hyperbaric, just several different elements to it that'll
Yeah,
just
yeah,
be.
yeah. Mobile. There's so much going on in like the mobile fitness and wellness space. I talked to a co-founder of a company called Fit Truck. They're out of Kansas City, but they built this really interesting truck that just like opens up and it's got all of this fitness, equipment that comes out of it. It's really amazing.
So are they going location to location, or are they setting up somewhere almost permanently with the truck?
They go location to location. They've sold a handful of units. A lot of them have been co-branded or rebranded to other companies. And one of them is like a YMCA. Another one is a fitness supplement company based out of Missouri. It's pretty big. I can't remember the name. It's like Fit Form or something like that. And so, yeah, it's a great venture. The co-founder is a great guy, Jeff, and yeah, looking forward to seeing them build more trucks as this kind of how do we do things mobily? How do we do things pop up for health, wellness, fitness continues to expand.
And now I've been advertised a few different, what would you call it, cookie cutter startups that you would be a franchise for, that are also doing something similar, like a hot and cold wellness center.
Yeah, yeah, that was interesting to see when those ads started popping up into my Instagram of it's no longer, the abundance of cold plunge inflatable Chinese chiller boxes, but actual franchises
Yeah.
that are now like running ads on social media. Like own a contrast spa franchise. And yeah, it's interesting.
So, Ark, now, where are you working? Are you working primarily with people online? Are you going in person? Are you going to events? And are you sticking to Texas? Are you traveling? How's that working out?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Primarily, it's been in person, and again, like there's so much networking opportunity here in Austin. And I'm going to a startup founder pitch event tonight, and so most of my client creation efforts have been in that kind of in real life, in person. I spent some time working on my social media late last year to test that as a client creation funnel, and it just wasn't it didn't feel like the right energy. And as for what I want to do, there's so many people I know who are successful with an Instagram client creation funnel who are in fitness and nutrition, things like that. That seemed to work pretty well for some people that I know. But for really the operations of a startup or of a company, an established company that I love to work with, it just wasn't great. I wasn't getting the traction that I was looking for, and so that's kind of why I shifted my energy away from, you know, producing reels and working on CapCut and doing a couple episodes of a podcast. It was all fun to do, and it's time and energy, and I have to test things. Is something that I talk with clients about evolving the relationship with results. And nothing is good, bad, right, wrong. It's just effective or ineffective. And if something is ineffective, ask yourself, okay, do I adjust it to seek efficacy, or do I pivot? Do I go down a different avenue? And I have amazing colleagues who are more in the executive coaching and business coaching and consulting kind of demographic there. And something that was kind of common when I discussed with them is they said most of their client creation is in real life, and when you want to talk to a project leader, a business owner, or an entrepreneur about their company, and you want to get into not just the superficial, front end view of it, but what are the obstacles? What are the problems that need to be solved? What is the growth strategy and vision? And what is the energy being put towards that in committed action to, pull in the future vision into the present moment? Those conversations are just, I find, best facilitated in real life. And so, hence again, out here in Austin, where there's such a density and a microcosm of all of these people working on interesting things.
Yeah, you're not alone. I think I've noticed that a great deal lately as more and more people are moving away from the Instagram slash Meta presentation because they're finding maybe that market's been saturated with maybe potential, not fraud, not scams, but people that are selling the same blueprints over and over and over again. So they've kind of desensitized the market in a weird way.
Yeah, and like I say, there's a good amount of demand in a market like Austin with all of its entrepreneurs and project leaders. There's also so much supply when it comes to someone who's a quote unquote coach. I say you can't throw a stick at Barton Springs without hitting a coach. There's so many young people who have done, maybe they've done some things, maybe they haven't, maybe they're just lifting a blueprint out of a book or another program that they've opted into and repackaging it, and for whatever is effective or sustainable for them, it's great. And yeah, when I really want to get into the nitty gritty of a project, working on something that I align with or that I believe in a way where I can impart my skills, knowledge, education, wisdom, and experience. Yeah, those conversations are juicy, and I love when I can find them.
Yeah, the mastermind uh, are they're great. I'm not going to knock them, but I will say that in my feed alone, where I'm not paying to be honest for any of these things, I've gotten advertised the same things over and over and over again with so many different faces on it that I wonder like how people that are actually looking for it could make a decision or go with something that they actually trust, or if they're one and done on those kind of things or whatnot. So I think the direction that you've gone is absolutely the right way and the way forward. And I can't imagine it working out the same way it did for that brief window on Instagram for the long. So good on you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not like in my coaching or consulting that I've necessarily invented anything new. I am myself repeating the 500 books that I've read, and whatever I've learned from my military experience, my education, my early professional experience, my entrepreneurial journey, which in many ways can be similar or analogous to what other people have done. And so it does get into a little bit of personal brand. Like I can and am often at its core, guiding, recommending, instructing on things that other people are guiding, recommending, and instructing on. I didn't invent breath work. I didn't even invent taking ice baths. I invented a machine to do it. I didn't invent, mindset. I didn't invent meditation. And the goal there is to align with clients who energetically and culturally align with my specific presentation of it, my specific, personality type, or somebody who values the way that I still do speak from a military experience and kind of radical candor, cut to the chase. I don't yelp at people or try to drop clients for push-ups, although sometimes I wish I could. But it does get into, we are all as unique as a thumbprint. And even when some of the core modalities that you can see across a broad spectrum of professionals, someone's going to resonate with your delivery of it. And that's ultimately what's important, because the client needs to resonate with the message that's being presented. They need to feel that they are supported and understood, while also being guided towards incremental growth towards their own stated goals.
Absolutely. With that said, let's say we're talking to, I don't know, any random person in a random place that we can't access easily, and they're listening to this podcast. What's your first and foremost advice? And I'm not talking about giving the same old speech that we'll tell everybody, make yourself a better person every 1% of the day, but one actual modality that they could change their life with. And where should they start?
The number one thing that I start with each client on is communication. Communication is the most powerful technology. Language is the most powerful technology that humans have ever developed. It's the technology from which all other technologies are derived. We don't get video call without language. We don't get industrialism without communication. We don't get technology. We don't get agriculture without being able to communicate these things. We don't get from one tribe who is keeping a fire alive to, a region of tribes keeping a fire alive without being able to communicate. How do we do it? What is it about? And so the greatest technology humans have in their tool belt is language. And that's the number one thing that I experience, especially younger entrepreneurs, in having the most opportunity to develop. How are you communicating? First and foremost, to yourself about yourself. How are you speaking to you about you? Whether it's in your mind, in a journal, looking at the mirror every day, how are you communicating to you? Because that, more than anything else, influences not just how the individual thinks about their growth, their vision, their pathway forward, how they feel about it, how their nervous system is reacting to it. Are they communicating to themselves about themselves in a scarcity mindset, in a mindset of catastrophization? Or are they doing it in staying in the positivity and possibility? Are they holding to the vision of the life that they want to create? Are they communicating to themselves in a productive way to identify what are the incremental steps between their current state and their desired future? And from there, that communication guidance goes into how are you communicating to your partners, your staff, your stakeholders, your clients, your customers in a way that enrolls them into ultimately what it is that you want from them, whether it's work in the venture, whether it's financial resources and partnership, whether it's purchase of goods or services. How are you communicating to them in a way that enrolls them in their own vision of the life that they want to live in a way that aligns with your vision? And you find those intersections. And I find that when individuals can really evolve their communication, the language, the words that they speak, how they are speaking them to the right audience, starting with the self audience, then they find that they are more energized, more aligned. They're receiving more opt in, whether it's, on the partnership, investment, employment side, or revenue side with, sales of goods and services. And so that's the number one thing. Think about how you are speaking to yourself about yourself. And if you think that I am a good public speaker, if you think that I have a good way of speaking, understand I wasn't born this way. This is a skill. This is a practice. It's like a yoga of something to continue. It's like a martial art of speaking, of removing the ums and the da, and the inflection of voice and da, everything like that. It can be learned. It should be learned. And if you want more growth in your project, I highly recommend some radical work in communication and language.
Awesome. Awesome. Couldn't agree more. So applying that and pursuing purpose, as we both know, purpose is absolutely essential to all kinds of success and to personal health. And what is your advice for somebody who hasn't necessarily found that click yet, that light bulb, that purpose? Where do they go to seek it? How do they find it? And how do they apply this in their life?
What worked for me was all of the reading that I was doing, of really studying culture and life and history and all of the topics that I was just crushing audiobooks and real books. Learn about the world that you're living in, learn about its history, learn about its current state. Pick a vein if whatever you feel, whether it's politics, religion, health, wellness, fitness, nutrition, pick a vein and just keep learning. Because the more that you learn, the more that gap is going to identify itself. And you're going to find yourself in a position where there's something that doesn't exist, that you see the gap and you say, somebody should do something about this. And you're going to realize, I am that somebody. As they say, luck is the combination of preparation and opportunity. The number one thing that you have control over is your preparation. That's the thing you absolutely have control over. How are you preparing for an opportunity to manifest, or a light to shine on it, or a light bulb to go off in your head. You can also create opportunity to a certain extent. How are you going to the places and associating with and communicating with the people who are doing things like the things that you want to do? This gets into masterminds. How are you associating with the people and the content and the knowledge and the education and the experience that not only continues to increase your preparedness, your preparation for that opportunity, but also just from a raw numbers perspective, starts presenting opportunities until something clicks, aligns, a light bulb goes off, and there you are. And then the real journey begins.
Somebody's listening today, then they align with your message. They completely want to learn more. How do they go and pick your brain? Can they reach out?
Instagram is my biggest social media, at Jason underscore Arcnav. That's ARCNAV, Alpha Romeo Charlie November Alpha Victor. Email me directly, jason@arcnav.com. And I love having conversations, learning about the projects, the companies that people are building. Again, I am always in my own continue to study and continue to learn, because that's when the light bulbs go off and the opportunities align with the preparation.
Awesome, brother. I consider it very good fortune that I found you and found your whole crew back when I did. I got to experience the Morozko when I did, and looking forward to having one of my own again.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was good to see you. And yeah, looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Yeah, and I'll look forward to seeing what you're working on next. I know you got something up your sleeve and something's coming around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here, Jason.